I'm sorry, y'all. I'm so sorry. Um, can you see me, Voli? Where is he? Okay, so I love technology, but I don't love technology because it just does all these crazy things. I'm so sorry, y'all. I I did not realize that I was not on the Wi-Fi, so I was on 3G and it couldn't handle the video stream. But I'm so sorry. Let me go ahead and get started again. Again, Molweni, Sawubona, Dumelang, Goeiemiddag, good afternoon. Welcome back to my channel, and I hope you guys are having a wonderful and an awesome Sunday afternoon. Welcome to Mama Sunday Afternoons with MamaDee. So I have my glass of water here. And so because this is gonna be a little long, and I hope you guys stay for a while and ask questions and um chime in at any given time. But I'm so sorry about that. So I wanted to talk about the challenges that immigrant families like mine experience when we move to a new country. And a lot of people assume that, oh, if you move to a new country, it must be, smooth sailing from there on. But it's not as simple as you think. In fact, a lot of families face challenges, but I think a lot of us, what motivates us to get to go through them and to grow from them, is because we made a decision to leave our countries, and we try and remember those reasons every time you feel like the going gets tough. Um, so I'm gonna just say the things that I went through as a family. Sorry, let me adjust this a little. I'm going to go through all the things that I went through, at least some of the things I can recall that were hard for our family. So the first thing, once the euphoria of moving to a new country wears off, the reality starts. Okay, and the first thing that really hits a lot of us is establishing credit. In America, unlike in South Africa, you lose your credit status. In America, you build your credit status, meaning that when you first come to this country, um, let's say if you want to buy a car, it's easy to buy things in America with credit. So let's say you buy a car, you buy a house. We didn't buy a house immediately. We first bought a car because in our area it's very, very hard to move around without a car. So we bought a car, and I recall hey all, hey Lorenzo, hey. I know. It's very late right now in South Africa, and welcome. And I'm so thankful that you're here, by the way, all the way from South Africa. And undibulisele apo ekaya. But anyway, so credit. So in America, everybody wants to sell you something, right? Because this is the biggest capitalist country in the world. Everybody wants to sell something, and you're like so excited because you're thinking, like, gosh, when I was in South Africa, I had the hardest time, like finding, being able to buy things. And yeah, I can easily buy them. But what they do, because you have no credit history, they charge you very high interest rate because you have no real credit history. So my advice would be to people who are moving to a new country: find out in your country, how do you establish credit. You don't have to buy big things like cars and stuff like that. You can buy small things or use credit cards and stuff like that you can pay every month to build your credit, so you don't end up paying way too much for basically getting, like stuff that an American pays very little for. In my case, a lot of Americans were getting good credit, and I was paying like my credit was high. And also understand, what does having a good credit score mean, so that you don't end up you don't end up wasting a lot of money because you don't have good credit. So that's number one challenge that we faced, and we were able to overcome that. And I've been in America for 20 years now, and I feel like I've paid my dues, which were very expensive dues, by the way. But I've paid them, and like I've worked on getting my credit to a very respectable place, and so I'm happy about that. So what's the second challenge? The second challenge is just adjusting to the to the culture. You come from a foreign culture, and it's important to not make the assumptions that you have, like a lot of us when we come to America, especially America, because America sells so much of itself outside of the United States. So when you come here, you have these ideas that are informed by what you've consumed on television about what America is. You come here and you kind of have that idea that this is what no, you have to keep a very open mind to make sure that you really learn about the local area, because a lot of places, it's not like what's the word, like Hollywood where I live. People like go to church, people are very conservative, people are very down to earth, average people. And I I don't live in Hollywood. In fact, Hollywood doesn't exist, like if you want to put it in those terms. So it was important for me to learn the lingo. Like one of the interesting things, so when I first moved to America, like I wasn't allowed to work for 2.5 years, almost I think 3 years, and I was fine with that because I was raising my son, who I had given birth a year after I got here. So I was okay with that. But, and by the way, that's gonna be another topic that I'm going to talk about, this the concept of stay-at-home moms, because it's very big in America, and I'll tell you how I felt about it and blah blah blah. But I don't want to digress too much. But one of the things I did was sell cars. That was my first job here in America. So, because I was taking anything I could take after 9/11, and so I sold cars. And so I would go and show someone a car, and they'd be like, "It's all right, it's all right." And I'm like, okay, they love it, they're going to buy it, but it's all right means I don't like the car. It's all right, I don't love it, therefore I'm not going to buy it. So understanding those little, like differences in how people express themselves, it's very, very, like important. So just adjusting to that. So sorry, there was something. Oh, like also the food was a big, adjustment for me, because Americans, they eat pretty much similar foods as South Africans, vegetables, starches. Even the preparation is very similar. The things that are unique to America are the fruit pies. They're big here, especially here in the South where I live. And of course, Thanksgiving, turkey, and all of that. But I found out that there's something called soul food, which I didn't know about before I came to the United States. But basically, that's how we eat growing up, with the exception of the fat back. I think that's what it's called. But basically, they put globs of fat in food that would otherwise be healthy. So we grew up eating that, but we just didn't put as much fat, like people here. So, but I had to adjust. I had to learn to eat. I mean, it took me many years, because in South Africa, yes, you go on a diet, yes, it's important to watch what you eat, but in America it's very difficult to be on a diet, because there's so much food, oh my gosh, the concept of buffet in South Africa, when you go to a buffet, you go into a sort of like how a cafeteria is. You go in the beginning of the buffet, you take your food and you pick up all the things you want and you go pay. In America, most buffet, you go in and it's all you can eat. So imagine if you grew up very poor, very hungry, and all of a sudden you are, okay, I know I'm saying a lot of things, but you gotta bear with me. Growing up, there was so much poverty. Dreaming about a food a table full of food was a normal occurrence, because a lot of us were so hungry and poor. And yes, we by the time, like, I left South Africa, a lot of people had access to, like, a lot of food, especially in the cities. But then it was still, like, a very reasonable access to food. Whereas in America, there's just so much food. It's not necessarily the healthiest food, there's just so you have to learn to have self-discipline, which becomes hard if you grow up without food. So, but anyway, I had to adjust to all those things, and I feel like I've adjusted. But also, so that's the challenge, adjusting and really feeling like you're part of the people. That takes a while, and it's okay, it's normal, it's expected, and that's how it should be. So another challenge is raising your children. Okay, so it depends on where you go in the United States. A lot of different areas in the United States have different cultures. So I'm going to make general statements based on my experience. So the challenge here is very personal challenge, in my view, meaning somebody can have a different experience. So the big thing in America is play dates, okay? When your kids are young, you take your kids to a play date. That means that you have to take your kids, put them in the car, drive across town, so you can your kids can have an opportunity to play outside of school. That's something that I didn't grow up with, and I had to, and I'm sure a lot of Americans, they're like, we didn't grow up like that. Yeah, I understand, but that's how it is today. In fact, until recently, in our neighborhood, there weren't kids that were playing outside. So Luke kind of had a lonely, I think, upbringing in a way. But my daughter, Kit, the oldest one, in the neighborhood where we stayed, there were a few kids. Once she was old enough to go to school, even when she went to middle school, some of the kids lived in our neighborhood, so she could play with them. But the challenge now is in terms of values. So Americans are very casual, pretty much in everything that they do, and I've mentioned this in one of my previous videos. Americans are very casual, even though in the South it's expected to say yes ma'am, yes sir, which is something we similar to how we grew up. Remember, those who are from South Africa, remember, we used to say, like, if you saw somebody's mother or someone who's of a mother's age, whatever that means, meaning someone who's older than you, who could be someone else's mother, the way you greeted them, you would say hi auntie, or hi mama, or so and so's mama, like that's how you would refer to them. So when we first moved here, we had a lot of challenges because we met other expats that were from different cultures, where yes ma'am, yes sir was not important. I remember one of our friends we met was a doctor, and she insisted that my kids call her by her first name. And this she had kids this about the same age as my kids, and she insisted that my kids call her by her first name. And then when we met my other friends who are black African Americans, they thought my kids were so disrespectful, because now, remember, I'm used to hanging out with these white people, right? And now after I had Luke, I had joined this baby group, and I happened to hit it off with one of of the women there, who happens to be African American. So she introduced me to more African Americans. So there's that, racial difference in terms of how people, do things, right? And so my kids, we see this, like, once we got to know this lady, my kids would call her, by their name. And also remember, growing up, my daughter called me by my first name. She didn't call me mom, right? So They were like so shocked. How could she call you by your first name? How, like they were like hysterical. They could not, like believe that, like this young child can call, someone by their first name. So I had to explain to them that when I first came to America, we hung around a lot of white people. So my kids were kind of used to just calling them. In fact, some of them would insist that you call them by their first name. And so because of that, we had to learn, like the culture. This is what people do here, and all of things. So it was quite an adjustment, but we made the adjustment, and my kids understand now. It's yes sir, yes ma'am. And again, it's coming back, like from our culture, because I had my daughter out of wedlock. She could not call me mama. She had to call my mom mama. Therefore, she called me by my first name. So everybody in my in my my relatives, they call me by my first name, even the littlest babies. That was the same thing, by the way, from my mother-in-law as well. Everybody called her by her nickname. Nobody called her, like, I mean, some of the kids called her mama because she was a lot older now. But anyway, so that's that. Raising children can be a challenge. So I'm going to the next one, which is death. Oh my gosh. So I've talked to a lot of people who have immigrated, right? And a lot of us here, I've been here 20 years almost, and there are people who've been here longer, and I haven't really asked people who've been here longer than me, how do they feel about this, right? Because I come from a very strong culture that has very defined ways of how we deal with death, and so that has been really the challenge, because you think you a lot of times, even though you have moved on with your life and you're in a new country, a lot of times you can feel torn between your old country and your new country, because in fact, that's part of why. Let me stay focused. Let me stay focused on. So we've thought about, if something were to happen, where would you bury your loved ones, especially if you've been in this country for so long. And that's the hardest thing, in my view, that we have to deal with. What would happen? You really have no idea, because that means that if you take them back to your old country, that means that now you're going to have to go back there many, many times, because that's something that's so meaningful to your family, and a lot of us don't want to confront that. And I know at some point my husband didn't even want us to talk about that, because really, what are you going to do? If you have your life here, and you still have your life here, what are you going to do? If you take your family, your loved one back home, what are you going to do? Are you going to go back, or are you going to come back and have to go back all the time? So that's a big challenge, and that's something that I think a lot of immigrants never want to confront, because it's a very serious matter, and you cannot just like do it any other way. I know that we've had people that we know that are expats that have passed away, and a lot of them were taken back. I know one person who had their loved one buried here in the United States. So again, for me, to be honest with you, I have not given it a thought. I have given it a thought, but I have not decided what I want done, because I honestly don't know. It's probably one of the touchiest, like subject that we've had to deal with my husband. And then, so that's the those are the main point. And also another one that's very important, and I think a lot of parents will relate to this. Success becomes very important in your life, because when you leave your country for a better life, okay, it becomes hard when you don't make it, or you feel like you've not made it. And this is something that a lot of people have gone through, where, like, I remember when I first came here, I was like hustling, I was trying everything because I wanted to make it work. But fortunately, I went back to school, and that gave me a better opportunity in terms of, like, finding jobs and all of that. So I've been employed ever since. So it's been very, very helpful. But a lot of us go through episodes where we feel, like, some people are even afraid to go back home because they don't want to go back home and feel like they didn't make a difference, at least a significant difference in their lives, because it's like, what was the point, right? What was the point of leaving your home if you, sorry, I just looked at myself in the camera, and I'm so serious. Sorry, that's just who I am. I'm not mad or anything. I'm just a serious person. I'm sorry. But to get back to the point, it's a very serious thing. So in a way, that kind of puts a lot of pressure on ourselves to succeed, because anything else, that means you wasted your time, right? And then you add the fact that you can also put a lot of pressure on your children. That's why a lot of immigrant kids tend to do well. They do well because the parents feel so much pressure to make sure that their children succeed, because then it means it's worth it for them to have left their country. And that's something that, a lot of, like, a lot of us go through. I've seen it. I've seen the consequences of that, and I've seen how, like, how successful some, like, people become. And I know how heartbreaking when you don't, because, like, you leave home, it takes a lot to adjust and go to a new country and leave your family and everyone, only to come to a new country and not do as well as you thought you were going to do. And I think we already have those pressures, right? When we move, when we remain back home, like, if you're growing up with people, you have so much pressure to succeed. And then when you leave your country to in search of a better life, then you feel even more pressure to succeed, and it becomes very, very important for you. And that can put a lot of pressure not only on you but on your children as well. And that's something that I think a lot of us are figuring out how to do, right? And that's completely, like, understandable. So another point that I wanted, sorry, I was looking at my notes because I did put my notes down so that I don't ramble too much. But another issue is immigration. When you first move to your country, in our case, most of us move from, from our countries because we are offered a job in the new country, right? And so a lot of us, they will pay pretty much, like, for you to move to the new country. But there's a very lengthy immigration process that can be very costly. I know a lot of people have paid dearly into the American system of immigration. And in a way, in our family, we did pay some money towards the citizenship process. But fortunately, most of it was already done up to a green card, where my husband's family kind of took care of everything. But it's a very lengthy and costly process, especially if no company is sponsoring you. So it becomes very, very, very expensive to move to a new country, and you spend a lot of time recovering. I know people, and also there's a lot of lawyers or people who act like lawyers who take advantage of you. So you get ripped a lot. People basically taking advantage of you because they know how desperate you want your immigration process to go smoothly, because the United States can be very strict, and they can, deport you in the middle of your life. You've already heard, even with the, with what's going on right now with the immigration process. So everybody tries to get their papers in order, and that can be very, very costly. And a lot of people want to take advantage of you. And so that can be, like, something that, you that can cost you. So the final challenge, I think, for a lot of us, and I don't know if this is a challenge, but it's more of a decision, that you have to make for yourself. As I said earlier, you can feel torn, you can feel torn because you are trying to have a life in your new country, but you're wondering every day, in my case, whether you should have built another house. Yes, I want to build another house, but you wondering whether you should build another life over there. And that has been probably one of the biggest challenges for me, because I love South Africa, and I really do. And my family, pretty much all my family, with the exception of my immediate family, is over in South Africa. And I love the country, but there are a lot of advantages of living in the United States in terms of just safety and peace of mind. Like those, I shouldn't say that, because really peace of mind is based on how you think and how your attitude towards things, right? But just the crime issue is probably the one difference, I would say, that gives America an edge over South Africa, because it's a big problem. It is a big problem, and I know that we're not supposed to. I don't want to dwell on it, because that's not all what South Africa is to me, right? But I love South Africa. South Africa is a very beautiful country. So I'm always torn how much of my life needs to be over there versus here. So I made a choice to have a comfortable life in America, and until I get to a point where I feel like I can build something in South Africa. But that means also that it can cost you, a lot. So someone is asking, do you plan to go back? And I'm saying, like, I'm honestly like, here's what would be my ideal. Okay, I know that my children grew up in America. I don't know what's going to happen to my children in terms of where they're going to end up. If they end up living in America, even though my daughter, I know, loves South Africa and she would love to go work over there. Let's say my children end up living here because this is, this is the life that they're used to. For me, the biggest challenge was not having my adult life with my mom, okay, with my family back in South Africa, not being able to see them when I want to see them, not being able to do anything, when I want to do it. Like, I miss so much, right? So the challenge then becomes, if I go back to South Africa by myself, that means I'm gonna miss out on my children. So my life is a life of missing out, and I really don't want to go through that again. So the ideal for me would be to have life here and in South Africa, and that it means that if my children, let's say one of my children has a child or gives birth or something important to them, that kind of thing, I want to be there and I want to see that and I want to experience that. So that means that I will always have to have a life here in America if they are here. If they're not here in America, then yeah, it would be easy for me to be in South Africa, and then hopefully they'll be able to come more often than I was able to go home, because I haven't been able to go home as much as often as I would like to go. 3 years is a long time. A lot can happen in 3 years, and so I'm not one of those people who come from a very fortunate family, so I have to make the arrangements to go see my family all the time. That means money. That means that I have to reduce a lot of things here in order for me to save up and have all the money to go visit. Having said that, I could have chosen to have a very modest life here in America, but I was really not about to do that, because think about it, for those in South Africa, you want to think about people who come from the villages. Okay, I'm not saying South Africa is a village, but I'm using the analogy of people who come from the villages. They live most of their lives in the cities because that's where their jobs are. That's like how my life is. I live most of my life, in fact, I'm going to eclipse half of my life living in America. And so those people, a lot of them have to make a ton of sacrifices. 40 years, 45 years of their lives, they're making sacrifices. They're not living comfortable because they have this dream of going back to the countryside where they can retire and live, like a comfortable life, right? And I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to live in America like I was living tomorrow. I wanted to be comfortable, and I wanted my children to be comfortable, and I wanted them to be absolutely have the American experience, right? And so they can go to vacation, they can live in a comfortable home, all those things. They were a priority to me because I wanted them to have that. And then when time comes for me, if I want to go back to South Africa, I can go back knowing that my children are in a position to come and visit often, or I'm in a financial position to come to America and visit all the time, which is what other people do. Other people will move back to South Africa and then be able to visit as often as I want. So I want to be in a financial position. Having said that, I know that there was a water shortage in Cape Town, but in the Eastern Cape, it's been raining like crazy. It's so beautiful right now. It's so green. And every time I'm like, maybe I should just pack my bags and go home, because I just love South Africa so much. But America is comfortable, y'all, and that's really the truth for now, because America, it is comfortable country, but it can, oops, it can all be taken, away like that, and that's just the American way. So you enjoy it while you can, and you enjoy it while you can, and then when time comes, you just deal with that as it comes. But let me see if I can go to the comments here. So okay, so Anita, oh, let me see. She says, Nita says, don't worry, home is anywhere you feel safe and at home. That is true, but you know what I mean, right? That is true. We try to make America home to us, but you can't help but miss where you come from, because you can't just throw away that, and I miss it every day. But I try to keep sane by knowing that I can get to a point where I am able to go and visit, like whenever possible. And as I said, my children are getting older. That means that I can go to South Africa and visit more often. I don't always have to make it a huge vacation. Excuse me. When I go to South Africa, it's a huge expenditure, because I want my children to go and experience the good life in South Africa. So I really like try and make it a great experience for them. That's why they love to go to South Africa, and they love South Africa. I believe that's because of that I've only given them the best side of South Africa, so to speak. And so even though I take them to the townships and everything, I still get to show them the best side of like South Africa. Let me see if who else is saying okay, say stay there. Canada not any better? I think that's what let's see. Sorry. I'm not used to do that. Canada is not any better. Canada scares me because by the way, my friend was from Canada, and I know a lot of people who moved to Canada because Canada is better in terms of immigration services, and it's just a better country than America in terms of just they always say we are better Americans, and I totally agree with them. But and I'm not trying to be political or anything, but it's a frozen tundra. It's very cold in Canada, and I would be so scared. Like it's the end of winter here, right? March 21st is when the spring starts. So it's starting to warm up a bit, and I cannot wait for winter to be over. I hate winter. So whenever I think Canada, I think cold, cold, cold. And as someone who was born and raised in South Africa, the idea of being colder than I'm currently am, which by the way, North Carolina is considered not a cold place, but to me it is because I grew up with much warmer weather. Having said that, I would never go and live in Florida because Florida. I went to Florida I went to Florida in summer. It was so hot. It was like the devil was blowing hot air. I love that phrase. It was so hot, and I would not want to go and live in a place that hot. North Carolina is mild. In summer, July and August is the hottest. It's like in Cape Town, January and February, it's very hot. But hot not in the way Cape Town is hot and dry, so it's bearable. North Carolina is hot and humid. You sweat while you're standing and doing nothing. But fortunately, most of our homes here are air conditioned, and so that's very helpful. So I'm gonna see. Okay, so Nita is talking about South Africa, and yeah, that's something I should have talked about. Um, you know, America is a developed country, right? And South Africa is not underdeveloped. Don't get me wrong. South Africa is very developed. In fact, there are technologies that South Africa has that America doesn't have. A great example. If you go to Cape Town, for instance, you go to if you go to Cape Town, you can go to a bank and they will queue you electronically, and you will be placed in a line that serves what your needs are, right? And I thought that was awesome. It's sort of similar to what they have here in DMV, where they ask you why you're here, and that they use that same system in banks in South Africa. They have great parking, like parking technology, where it can tell you which parking spots are available, so you don't go around, trying to find parking. So those things are, South Africa is advanced, but America is also very advanced in terms of technology, of course, but the laws and the legal systems are very advanced. So it becomes very difficult for a person like me who wants to make themselves to be as successful, because you have very mature competition that can take you under like that, right? So having said that, a lot of immigrants come to America and they become successful. They start businesses and all of that, and they become successful. And so this is not to say you cannot be that in South Africa, but I think in South Africa it's much more easier. When I see all these young people and I see them opening businesses and doing all these great things, I'm like, that's awesome. That's something that it's not easy in a new country, because there's so many laws and competition is so much more advanced that it would be, it's not as easy to start a little something for yourself and grow. I'm not saying that it's impossible, of course. Someone asked, which one is cheaper, South Africa or the United States? That's a very, very difficult question. I'm going to go to the obvious one. Cars. I think cars are cheaper in the United States, not because they are cheaper when you compare like conversion rate. I think they are cheaper because the cost of credit in America is cheaper than it is in South Africa. Your interest rates and everything, it's easier, and also it's easier to get credit in the United States. So the interest rates, I think, make a difference. Most of us, when we buy cars, we buy cars on credit, and so as a result, it can be, that difference in interest rate can make a difference in terms of affordability. So I would say that in terms of food, I think America is a little bit more expensive than the than South Africa. US is more expensive than South Africa, especially what you would consider healthy foods, like fruits, vegetables, whole foods. Those things are very, expensive. Oh my gosh, if you can convert a price of an apple to a rand, which is South African currency, you'll be like, oh my gosh, no wonder people are so fat over there. I'm kidding. But the point is that, growing up in South Africa, part of why people were healthy, anything that was healthy was way cheaper than junk food, which now in South Africa, the opposite is true, which is why South Africans are gaining so much weight, because it's cheaper to eat unhealthy. Whereas when I was growing up, it was cheaper to eat healthy. You could go anywhere and buy fruit for nothing, literally for nothing. Everybody could afford it. Poor people could afford fruits and vegetables and meats. What we would call here in America whole foods. And but now that's become a little bit more, expensive. So yeah, food is cheaper in South Africa. Housing, it depends on the area. What's different, I think, about South Africa versus America, and I think I always forget to make this point, is the size of the middle class. When I say middle class, I mean, like your professionals, people who are not necessarily doing manual jobs. So you have a vast middle class in America. Therefore, a lot of people can pretty much afford to buy, housing, basic housing, basic, things like cars and stuff like that. So Americans can spend, and I'm sure someone else might actually, disagree with me. And of course, things are changing. So the middle class is kind of, I think, feeling a little bit of pressure in America. When I came here, Americans were literally living it up. This was during the tech boom, right? So a lot of Americans could afford it, and they still can. In fact, as you already know, America went through depression from 2008 to really starting 2007 until recently. And now you're seeing a resurgence of America. Housing has become a lot more expensive again, because you go anywhere in our area, they're building new condos, like new homes. We went to look, just to go out there to see how much, houses, in other areas. So the price of houses is mostly affected by the area, the school district, and all of those things, right? And so we went to look in a good school district, and the houses were ridiculously expensive, which makes me wonder, that, what does that mean for the average American, you know what I mean, coming into the market, and what's going to happen. I honestly don't know, but there's another boom that's going on, and that's, that's very, very, interesting. So housing, you can still find affordable housing, but housing has become much more expensive. In fact, again, this is a live vlog, so I'm going to digress a lot. In our downtown was pretty much dead, okay? And then maybe a few years back, it started rebuilding. They have new buildings everywhere going up, and it's become so expensive. It's become so expensive to even if you want to find an apartment downtown, it's become so expensive. So I really don't know what that's going to mean for the middle class, but it's a big, I don't want to say like it's a challenge, because again, you can still find affordable housing in America. You can find affordable housing in South Africa only in the township, and even then, township and in the villages. Cape Town housing is ridiculously expensive, way too expensive. Who are they selling to? That's my question. Okay, who are they selling to? It really boggles the mind as to how expensive housing is in Cape Town. You know, it's really like, I don't know. Tell me, people, please comment. Where should I buy? If I wanted to buy a house in Cape Town, which is where I would like to have a house, where is the cheap place? Because I've been trying to see, like what's out there and stuff like that. I was shocked, honestly shocked, at how expensive housing has become in Cape Town. It's way more expensive than where I live, which is interesting, because I can see the justification of why housing would be expensive here. But in South Africa, it doesn't make sense. It's too expensive. And I'm sure a lot of people are locked out of, better housing, because as I said, in the township, you can get housing, and even there, it's become expensive actually. But anyway, where am I don't know. But good questions, guys, and I'm really happy that we are having, we're having that. So I'm trying to see what else can I okay, so I'm not going to entertain any, any political. Hey, sorry if you guys are still on there. I was commenting right now. I was saying that I didn't know that you could. Oops. Let me close this. I didn't know that you could resume a screen. A stream. Okay, so I'm going to answer one more question, and it's gonna be weird because this video probably had a long period, close to 20 minutes, where it wasn't playing, and I tried to end it, and it said, "Do you want to resume?" I was like, "Okay, I'll resume." So next time I'll know to resume if there's an interruption. But someone asked a question, a very important question. What kind of racism have you encountered? But let me give you what I think about that, right? So when I came to America, South Africa had just gotten independence, Rainbow Nation, euphoria, all of us happy, lovey-dovey towards one another. Really, race was kind of like, I had a different feeling about race when I was coming to America. As a result, a lot of people that I hung out with were white people, right? In our neighborhood. So I really did not feel, like I was just as I was. Let me put it this way. I didn't think too much about my own race until I came to America, and even after I came to America, probably a few years after, where I realized how racism works in America. And it really, I don't want to delve deep into this because it's such a sensitive topic, and it can be taken in so many wrong ways. But I really had to confront my own blackness in America more than I had to when I was in South Africa, mainly because I believe the media in America profits so much from racism and profits so much from peddling stories about racism. So even if you were not really thinking too much about it, you have no choice but to think about it. And so as a result, I feel like, and I mean, I can bury my head in the sand and not want to think about it, but it's kind of hard to ignore in America because Black people are a minority. And so when you hear all these things, and you see all these things happening, it's very hard to be ignorant about them and to not want to deal with them. So I always try to deal with racism in a way that's, like the idea of racism, so that I can, like, personally, first of all, let me say, personally, I have not really like dealt with it the same way, like maybe someone who's poor has dealt with it, right? But I have experienced racism. But a lot of times it's the type of racism that maybe even the other person is ignorant about, right? Actually, let me stop here because I really don't want to go into it. Because the more I talk about it, the more I think about all these, like things, crazy things that have happened since I've been here. But just to say, on a high level, I've had to confront my own blackness and how I relate to everyone, but I've also had to really elevate the experiences and put them in the context of, like racism as a system, so that I don't feel so bogged down by it, and really feel trapped by it. So I will leave it at that, but I will definitely revisit this without having, like do it at the end of a very long stream. But I hope you guys have a wonderful week coming up, and we all have to go back to work. It's Monday tomorrow. We have to go and work hard and do what we have to do. And I'm so absolutely glad that you guys had an opportunity to be with me today, and I'm so happy that like I was with you. And this was actually one of my best streams, and I'm very grateful, like for the fact that you all tuned in. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful week. Mwah. I'm going to stop now, for real. Let me see how to stop this. How do I do it? I honestly don't know, because all my streams have been just going like, is this how you do it? Are you sure you want to stop streaming?